Welcome to this video series, How to Solve Enterprise AI, with me, Errol Kohlmeister, Executive AI and Data Advisor, and
Björn Scheje, Head of Technical Enablement at Peltarion.
Welcome to episode 4 of this video series now, Operating Your Models. Today we'll be talking about how you organize to actually get the most out of your business cases. Björn, you've been working for quite a long time now with enabling companies. What are some of the best practices? Or on the other hand, what are some of the don'ts you have seen as well?
Well, let's start with sort of the first and easiest don't. Don't treat AI like software. I mean, of course, in any big AI end-to-end solution, there's a lot of software, but you have to start sort of thinking about isolating the first AI part of it. Because when you try to buy software, basically you can ask the questions, how much will it cost and when will it be done? Because it's mostly, it's programmatic, based on rules. It can be predictable in that sense. But when you approach the topic of AI, you first need to drill down sort of on the use case, and you need to drill down on the first sort of small sort of proof of concept or proof of value, trying to establish what is really the AI part of this? What is it that we're trying to achieve? And I think the hardest part of this is actually that most stakeholders trying to sort of procure or buy or implement this lack education in AI. So it's very easy to treat AI like software, but implementing AI is a different kind of tool.
I couldn't agree more. So that's why many of the things around how you organize yourself is so important. I like the saying from Eric Schmidt, from the investor and board member of Google, which is more bats per inning, very American topic. But since you don't know the exact value, and since the value might be unclear in the future, you need to be able to run a lot of different things at once. So that's why it's become so important on getting these small autonomous teams that can work on a problem. It doesn't work, they can throw it away, they can start working on the next one. Because what you're doing is optimizing. So you need to organize for speed and agility. That's why organizational best practices, in my point of view, is a key success factor of this. But is agile enough? I mean, what you were talking about is more of a waterfall buying software approach. Is agile enough for AI, and how do you actually match that together with the research process as well? Do you have any thinking on that?
Yeah, I mean, agile, of course, the main part of being agile is having a short feedback loop. And having a short feedback loop is crucial for succeeding in this. But in connecting this to sort of the research or a traditional R&D process, I'd like to think of this as more of a sort of a funneling of ideas. Basically, you come from maybe 10 wild ideas that you would explore, and then you take them through the funnel and you try to evaluate them and establish what kind of value could we hypothetically get out of this, and then sort of funnel them more, try and build something on them. Do we have the data? Because the only way to actually make sure get something out of AI is basically by trying many different things at the same time. Because you will for sure know that some of these ideas will fall short. Maybe not because they're bad, but because the data wasn't there right now, or the timing wasn't right. So start with many ideas in parallel, and then use an agile approach with a short feedback loop to make sure that the right ones are the ones that sort of runs long.
But with my experience, this is a relatively challenging thing to do as well, because people are tied up in everyday business. You have to attend meetings, you already have a delivery pipeline. So what I've seen in large organizations that doesn't work is the decentralized approach when you're starting out, where you have a data scientist out in one business unit, in another business unit, and they try to do everything from the engineering part into looking at platforms, into convincing the stakeholders what to do. What do you say about creating a central team in the beginning until you actually have that critical mass to build up the capabilities and know-how, have a clear interface towards the business side, and then later on work more towards a decentralized? Do you think that would be a good idea for most enterprises, or do you see other things?
I think a challenge. I think on the other hand, you need a centralized approach because you need to make sure there's attention on this area. But on the other hand, if you would go for the entire centralized approach, you would have a really hard time getting all those sort of ideas and start funneling them. So I'd say you could start with a decentralized approach, but you need a lot of sort of managing and monitoring and helping of those decentralized teams, because most likely the educational level within AI will be starting from zero. So if you would have sort of the team to start actually helping all those decentralized teams from scratch, then that would probably be the fastest way to get the ideas up on the table. But then you'd need some centralized skill center helping all those teams getting value out of it.
So one of the things I've seen as well is you work agile, you potentially have a centralized place on creating your models, etc. But is everything really an autonomous product in these organizations? I've talked to a lot of enterprises and they say, oh, we're going to create these 2 pizza teams that Jeff Bezos always refer to, and they're going to be fully autonomous and be out there in the driving. Is that really the way forward, how to organize around AI? Or what do you say? I don't think so, because I think you need more central guidelines as well on getting the roadmap. Do you have any idea?
I mean, I could agree on why you would have this sort of autonomous team, because I think in order to drive these, really successful in these high value use cases, you need like sort of a task force around them. But then nothing in a big enterprise is autonomous, right? Everything is interconnected. And from what I've seen in the team I work with, I mean, what they need most help in is actually taking that thing, their idea, and actually working in the organization with the different stakeholders, making sure that the business is aligned, the technology is aligned, the data is there, and no autonomous team could ever do that.
No.
Because everything is connected to different parts of the organization. So you need that centralized buy-in, you need centralized attention and help. But then, of course, you could set up a sort of a task force around that use case, making sure that you have the right team doing it.
I mean, I think I would summarize that very easy with, if you want to go fast, go alone like a team. So if you want to go really, really fast, but if you want to go far and getting the enterprise adaptation, you need to build an interconnected team where they actually interact and have a lot of stakeholder interactions, etc., and getting that dependency on the company infrastructure. So any other things that you've seen in organizations that you would say are best practices from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could, to connect back to what you said about going fast and going far, I think you basically could do a combination of both of them. Because if you want to go fast, and I mean, it might be that you want to go fast in terms of getting ideas up, and then you could go totally decentralized, brainstorming think tanks, you put in a bit of AI education, everyone talk about value, possibilities, but then you come to a certain point where you want to get value out of that. And then you need to get sort of centralized, because otherwise they will only be like the POC graveyard. Things will just die out in these decentralized teams. And that is not just something we're talking about. I mean, we've seen it happen. I've been working with the team recently, and the team was 4 or 5 people, and we quite fast we come up with like 8 different ideas. 8 different good ideas. But they were all dependent on other parts of the organization. So you could easily build like a small technical proof of concept, or that, this could be done. AI could solve this. But then the big step is going from there to the next step, to trying to pilot that into the real business processes to show the value.
And I mean, that's what we call this episode, operating your models, because the complexity we talked about so far in this community has been very much on how do I deploy something into production, how do I make sure I can have multiple things, A/B testing, and it's complex enough. But then you add an additional complexity layer, which is all the business interactions that you need to have. You need to get that model out there. You need to get somebody to act on it. You need to integrate it into the existing processes. So that's why it's really about having an operating model and a plan on how to actually organize around this value. So it's not an easy question, and I think one of the best practices I've seen is autonomous product teams in all its glory, but I think it's having small teams and working more with value realization.
Yeah.
So you have your product teams which might deliver in the AI value, but then you have supporting teams as well to be able to kind of create that groundwork. Otherwise, your 2 pizza teams is going to work into a 10 pizza team. And you rather have specialized experts in actually doing these things as well. And products, for instance, they can go up and they can be closed. So what companies need to do is be agile in the organizations they set up, because things will also change. your requisites in the beginning will probably be completely different compared to the ones when you have 10, 100 models into production. So reorganizations are constant in this.
Yeah, and I think one thing we should also try to bear with us is that counting on these small teams to realize their own idea is probably sort of counting on them to do too much.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, in summary, what you should start with is potentially having a centralized setup where you start running your AI use cases and supporting the business, of course, at least until you get a good critical mass and build up the know-how in the organization. Of course, this totally depends on where you come from today. Don't focus too much on processes in the beginning. What it's really about is making sure you have the right commitment from the organization. Processes always comes later, but you need to start finding things out. So agility is a very important aspect in all of this. And then not everything is an autonomous product. Not everything is this agile manifesto type of setup. It depends. And in a large enterprise, you have so many dependencies and intersections that you need to account for. Thank you so much, and I'll make sure to tune in next time.